Hi, this is Charlotte Curtis, Head of Adult Services with the Livingston Parish Library, and we're here in the beautiful Denham Springs Walker branch of your Livingston Parish Library system with another session of talking about books. I'm a little nervous today because I'm going to be talking with someone who's a professional in the field of communications. This is McHugh David, who is the publisher of the Livingston Parish News. And I wanted to talk with him because I can think of very few things that have more importance in a community than having a good, strong, local to the community newspaper, because you're the one that cover the things that we really care about, the graduations, the sports, in addition to, if you look at the front page, of course, the latest COVID figures. There's a lot of factual information. It's a good news source, but they also care enough about the people in the community that they carry those little stories that get overlooked, but those are the important milestones. So I think a good newspaper like this kind of binds a community together, just as I think a library does too, because it's a place where people can gather and share ideas. So I'm asking you to tell me, how ever did you think about doing something like publishing a newspaper?
So, that's there's an interesting backstory to that.
Great.
My grandfather in 1966 actually bought what was then the Denham Springs News on a cocktail napkin at Jamaica's Italian restaurant in Baton Rouge. It's no longer there. It was on Government Street. They tore it down. And I'm told that actually the other family still has the napkin. However, I still don't have the napkin. I've never seen the napkin. At any rate, for about 10 years, my grandfather published the paper, and then he died of a heart attack on the golf course. In 1977, my father at the time had just gotten done with Vietnam. He had gotten his law degree on a GI Bill, and he was actually serving as the head counsel for the Public Service Commission. And he got the phone call. They went through all the funeral stuff, and my dad showed up Monday morning and said, "You also have a job. I'm going to be the publisher." And for 38 years, he published the Denham Springs News that became the Livingston Parish News in 1998, which was our 100-year anniversary. And as I was growing up, my dad and my mom both read to me when I was younger. My dad loved the Hardy Boys books, so we read those together.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they are. They're a lot of fun. But my relationship with the newspaper began actually during the political tenure of Bill Clinton when he was president. And my dad, we were at the kitchen table, and I do like to tell this story. I have to leave out certain details. But we were at the kitchen table, and my dad said, "What do you think about Bill Clinton?" And at that point, I'd kind of gone through middle. I was in either late elementary, early middle school, and the things I knew about Bill Clinton was he was president, he was from Arkansas, and he liked to play the saxophone. And we were still kind of trying to learn about what it is he was trying to do, which I of course learned a lot more getting my econ degree about what he did. But that's another conversation for another time. And I said, well, he's a pretty cool guy. He speaks well and he plays a saxophone. And my dad just turned blood red, and he was very upset. And he said, "I can't believe I read you all those books. You ain't gonna read." And as my people who watch this and knew my dad can hear him say that. So I started to read more. Started to read the paper more because I could tell that my dad was very disappointed. And I became a little more politically involved. Trying to hold my own with conversations. My dad was very politically involved. My mom was very politically interested. She had stopped being politically involved in the late 80s. But they were both kind of tour de forces when it came to that. So that was my initial sort of foray into reading for understanding, I guess is the best way to put it. I guess you can say, recreational reading has evolved over the years. Started with the Hardy Boys, sort of fiction, and I kind of bounced back and forth between, of course, reading for school, reading for information purposes, and reading for recreation. Of course, I to this day will tell people I had been waiting for Game of Thrones Book 5 for years, and it finally came out, and it was either study for my comprehensive exam in economics or read Game of Thrones, and I read Game of Thrones. Now I passed my comp just fine, but I did make that choice. So I've always enjoyed reading. I read, I also operate as editor of our paper, so I read everything that we put out. I'm lucky to be surrounded by folks who believe in it as much as I do. We have had some staff reductions over the years, and that's just as the landscape changes to more of a digital setting. But we have great writers, and like I said, as years progressed and as I got older, I got into more either nonfiction or historical fiction, which of course, they give you about the first 3 chapters of a book is historically accurate, and they kind of say, and then here's something crazy that could have happened if gods and monsters existed or something. But as I definitely got older, actually I would say right as my dad was passing away, I was involved in Dale Carnegie. I was a graduate of the program in 2016, actually not too long before the flood. And I was awarded the highest award of achievement in my class. But as we went through the contest and as I improved, I got all the books, which are really neat. One of them is in sort of an interesting perspective of Abraham Lincoln, right? And it's very much written from the perspective of, basically up until about his second year as president, Lincoln was a failure. He failed a lot. Now, was Abraham Lincoln truly a failure all the time? No. But it's written from the perspective of, failure is the best teacher. Getting into that, I started to get into a lot of the self-improvement type books. And I also got into, business books. Right now, I'm reading The Passion Economy, and I'm also reading Traction. Now, Traction is more of a guideline on how to build a business. But Passion Economy is very interesting. It's about marketing, and it's about being a business in the year of our Lord, as I like to say, 2020, which is completely different than what it was even in 2010, and definitely different than 2000. I mean, those two businesses probably wouldn't even do business with each other. So it's very interesting how my reading has evolved. I don't read. I actually haven't picked up a fiction book in probably 5 or 6 years. I'm more interested in the self-development and business development type books, which always fascinate me because everybody's got a different perspective on it. But I can always internalize it a little bit because everybody's story begins somewhere, kind of like my story about really reading for understanding. Before that time, I'd kind of read for entertainment. If you asked me what happened in one of those Hardy Boys books, I could probably give you an overview, but I really didn't start reading for understanding until I was between 10 and 11. And since then, I read slow because I have a little bit of my dad in me. My dad was a lawyer by trade, ended up as a publisher. But I like to pick out phrases and stuff that stick out to me, that have extra meaning. As I like to hear people say, because it's true, the devil's in the details, right?
Definitely.
And of course, if you don't learn how to read, and especially if you don't learn how to read for understanding, which I believe are two very different things, you're going to miss out on a lot of those things. Those details aren't going to stick out to you. You're not going to be able to pick them up and say, this phrase here is very meaningful for X, Y, and Z. We did an interview, we talked about it right before we sat down, with Superintendent Joe Murphy. I did that with him yesterday. And one of the things that I picked out from him was he continued to mention continuous learning. And, it's very interesting to hear him say that, because it's one of those things where when you enter a situation like this, he's not going to use phrases like new normal or this is the thing that we're doing. He's going to say, we are going to keep teaching these kids, and it's going to be continuous learning. So I picked up on that phrase, and we hung around with it for a while. But I would absolutely say that reading has been extremely important. To be able to do something like this, because details. I mean, It's details. I'm not. I don't do slant. My opinion pieces are, as I've been told, very dry and very boring, because about 90% of them are facts and numbers.
You're counting people to be able to read the information you provided and form their own opinion.
Well, for most of those, yes. For the opinion pages, on the opinion page, we do provide an opinion. I give my opinion at the end. I usually try to make it a helpful opinion. This is what I believe would be a good path going forward, I guess you could say. But yes, with the rest of those, it's here's the info. Your opinion is your opinion, and I welcome it. I'm very interested to hear it. You get a lot of opinions, and of course, the devil's in the details. How did you formulate that opinion? Why did you formulate that opinion? That interests me as well. But that's. I don't know if I went too long-winded, but that's my relationship with reading. It has evolved over the years, but it did begin really when, I guess you could say, my father pushed me to be a better reader, to pay more attention to the things that were going on around me, and it's definitely been beneficial.
So parents have a big influence in their children's, in the development of good reading habits.
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that. I look back fondly on the memories I have of my dad and I sitting there reading, and my mom and I sitting there reading. That kind of sowed the seed. But you have to remember that just because you sowed a seed doesn't mean that you don't tend it. You got to water it, fertilize it.
When you plant a garden, it's not over after you plant the seed.
Sure. And a lot of people treat it differently because they're, for some people, the seed in the water might be school. But some folks go out and talk to their plants, right? I guess in my dad's case, he probably would have gone out there and been pretty hard on his plants. But it exactly pushing them to be better. There's nothing wrong with being an ancillary to school. I believe that you're letting, much like in sports. I'm an athlete. I'm a former athlete, I should say. Definitely a former athlete. But you let the coach do their job, you let the teacher do their job, and you try to be a support system at home. That's your job. Because just like in most cases, work doesn't stop in the workplace, school shouldn't stop either. Kids should be learning. You should be pushing them, and that was always what my dad, in his own very special way, believed in excellence in people, and so he pushed and pushed. So. Reading and pushing kids to be better readers absolutely starts at home. Because, when they're assigning these things at school, it's part of a curriculum, it's preset. A lot of times these books, in some cases, especially with advanced readers, they've already read the book. So what's the point? Well, read it for better understanding. But that's got to be pushed at home. Especially for a lot of these teachers here in Livingston Parish, they may see 300 kids a day.
Yes.
And they're going to push you, and they're going to work with those kids, and they're going to do the best they can, but they've got to have that parental assistance at home. So yes, I absolutely agree with your statement, is that, being a better reader, improving reading, and pushing reading, and fertilizing that growth as a reader starts at home. And parents are a huge part of that.
Especially during crisis times like this, where parents have had to really be involved in the day-to-day education of kids.
Yes.
And as the father of several children, I'm sure it's been an interesting few months, has it not?
Oh yes, I'm a stepfather. It was very interesting. Leading up to this, our oldest was in Japan on a study abroad. Yes.
Oh, no.
Oh yes, it was very interesting. And he was coming home for break and was very dedicated to the idea that he was going to go back for a second semester. And of course, his mother and I were very dedicated to the fact that he was not.
Yes.
And eventually the school said, no, you're not going back. We're not, you're staying here. Which I think was the best decision.
Of course.
But I do also have he's soon to be 17. 16-year-old at Denham High and a 12-year-old at Denham Junior. And, everybody's staying in touch with those teachers very consistently, trying to, and both of them were a little different. George, the 12-year-old, could get on. He might have a few questions, but he'd get online, get on his Google Classroom, go through his stuff, and it would take him, a couple of days throughout the week. Well, Caleb, the high schooler, constant. You know, and it's like, son, you got to check it. You got to check it every day. You need some help? No? Okay, we'll get it done. You know, and you kind of become
A coach.
Yes, you know, because I was going to say cheerleader, but it's not cheerleader. You're more of a coach. You know, you're an at-home coach telling them, you know, because that was the other interesting part of it. They got to see me work from home. And, you know, I was down there getting set up for my morning show at about 6:45 every morning. In some cases, my teenager hadn't quite gone to bed yet. And, but he would get to see that. And then, you know, through 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, I'd be working. And, you know, it wasn't the kind of work where I'm just sitting there on my phone, you know, scrolling through things. You know, it's like I'm still working. So that was very helpful for them to understand, you know, like that time I was 15 minutes late picking you up from play practice. It wasn't because I forgot about you. It's because I needed to finish this up before I left. And besides, you got to hang out with your friends for 15 minutes. I saw them, you know, it wasn't the end of the world. So that was a good thing. But with them seeing that, and then with it, you know, their mom and I being participatory in their education, that was very helpful for them to see. But yeah, you became an at-home coach, you know, and trying to get them to read. I will say the 17-year-old is more of a hands-on kid. He wants to read some instructions and then he wants to do it. 12-year-old likes to read, period. If you tell him read this book, he's going to go read the whole book, which, you know, everybody's a little different. But reading, you know, that kind of puts you in a position where, you know.
I apologize for the.
No, it's okay. I mean, here we are in a public space, right? I saw him pulling up on that lawnmower, and I was like, about to get a little background. Look, doing my morning show from home these past couple of weeks has been tons of fun.
Explain, because some of our patrons may not know about your podcast.
So we have 2 different kinds of podcasts. Every morning, I do kind of an update on the headlines from the day before, give a little coronavirus update in terms of statistics and things like that. It was a little easier to kind of flow through back when the governor did daily press conferences, because, you know, everybody kind of wanted the Cliff's Notes of what he said the day before. I've been doing that from home. And we have 3 dogs and a cat, and of course I have 2 kids. So it's always been very interesting. You know, the teenager hadn't quite gone to bed yet, talking to his friends in the other room, and I'm like, hey, please stop. Or, you know, the cat sits on my shoulder in the middle of the show, or the dogs start barking at something. It hasn't happened that often, but it has happened, and it's been very interesting. We also do long form podcasts where I sit down for a 20-25-minute interview with specific individuals. Now, there are, as you've discussed, community leaders here in Livingston Parish who will go on for several hours if I let them. So we try to break that up into individual segments. But even still, you know, getting prepared for those podcasts, you know, a lot of people say, well, it's audio, you know, what kind of reading is involved in it? Well, you know, a lot of the reading that's involved in it is getting prepared to ask these folks questions. You know, I've got to know the facts. I've got to know the background. I need to know where we need to go with this conversation. A lot of that's reading off the script. You know, reading is very much, especially in business, you know, there's some intuitive or intuition that's involved in business. But I mean, if you can't read new rules, new regulations, new business practices, you're going to get left behind. So I really think, you know, so that's explaining my morning show, but I really think reading is a very big foundation of life, really. And I mean, that sounds dramatic. And it may be dramatic because I'm the publisher and editor of the local paper, but I really do think that it is a huge foundation for life and especially personal growth. I really subscribe to that. I believe in it a lot. I got a big old stack of books next to my bed I'm trying to catch up on, but I've been taking notes on traction and the passion economy, because I want to make sure that I understand them, because they're both very dense.
And you know, you can log those in our virtual summer reading program and earn a completion prize.
Hey.
3 books or 3 activities. So if you go online to our Facebook page, and you'll see some information there, but this counts as one of your activities. So be sure and update your Beanstack account to say, I watched the interview. And there'll be a space where you can answer a question that we ask, and then that's a badge towards your completion prize. So.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah,
I'm glad I can help you.
Earn a badge.
Yeah, I'm glad I was just about to say, I'm glad I can help you guys earn a badge.
Just like the merit badges, we'll have a sash.
Can you put my face all the way across?
Oh, I'll see if we can do that. That would be fabulous.
One year I was like, I need to buy an outside the box Valentine's Day present for Melanie, and I ended up getting her socks that have hearts in my face on them.
Are you kidding?
No.
Oh, wow.
So that's where that joke came from. I was like, well, maybe you can put my face all over the sash. That'd be great.
Well, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed hearing about your whole approach to reading and what it can do. So.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And please, these are $1 on the rack right now because we are in broadsheet. We had switched magazine for a while. COVID caused some business disruption, but we wanted to continue to put out the news, so we found a way to do it economically for the time being. And I ask that you check these out. They are here, are they not?
Oh, yes.
So if you'd like to.
And we also have archives of past editions, so you can go to our newspaper database and read past editions of the Livingston Parish News. I'm not sure how far we go back. I don't know if we went back.
2017. I will be sending 2018.
Oh, good.
Sometime in the next week.
Fabulous.
That's what I was talking to Mr. Giovanni about.
Great.
So we'll be trying to upload more of those, and of course we have the e-edition archives on our website as well, so you can go check them out there. But it's always very interesting. One of the reasons that if you could flip that over for a second, one of the reasons I've been keeping the coronavirus statistics is because a lot of people look at them day over day, and it's kind of like losing weight.
Oh,
if
wow.
you look at it day over day, you kind of, it all blurs together. You're not really getting a good idea. But if you take these back editions back to when this started, you can look at them week over week.
Yeah, because that's 29,000, here's 32,000, and then this is 35.
Right, and it kind of gives you a better idea of sort of that week over week increase, and it makes it a little more palatable for folks. Because when you start seeing, well, there was only 200 on Sunday, we only had 300 today, that's not so bad, but when you look at it in a week over week perspective, you start to get better data. And that's, that was one of the things that the governor did say was, it's real easy to kind of track over day to day to day and say, oh, we're doing great. But that's why the feds wanted a 14-day period. We need 2 weeks of data.
You really do.
Because you really need to be able to see those trends over time. So that's why, I've been keeping that on the front page. We've been asked about that. Why do you put those on the front page? And I say, well, if you keep them and you look at them week over week, it gives you a real good idea of sort of the ups and downs and all arounds that we've been taking. I think that's a Dr. Seuss quote.
Yes, no, you can. Dr. Seuss is always good. Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you for watching another session of Talking About Books. Don't forget to log it so that you can get an activity badge. Thanks.